Hi everyone, welcome to Itsy Bitsy's live read of Forbidden Desire, taken by her son's best friend by L.M. Mountford. Prologue. Watching her son drive down the road, Elizabeth Clark sighed heavily. Today should have been one of the happiest days of her life. He'd done it. After 5 years, 5 long years of waiting, procrastination, and disappointment, he'd finally done it. Victor, her sweet baby boy, was finally moving out and going to university. It hadn't been easy. He'd done abysmally in his GCESs, barely scraping a passing grade. So he'd taken a break to work and save some money before going out and blowing it under the guise of traveling. He wanted to find himself, he told her, see the world. And he had, from what she could gather. He'd seen the world, one club at a time. She doubted she'd ever known what he'd gotten up to out there, and she didn't want to. He hadn't written or called, just turned up on the doorstep, then a few days later enrolled in the city college for various courses. He worked hard, gotten his head down, studied, and finally he'd done it. She should have been ecstatic, proud, and practically bouncing off the walls. What mother wouldn't be? Yet all Elizabeth felt was a sense of abandonment. He was going, leaving her all alone with him. The thought sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the autumn breeze whispering through her long raven hair. When the car turned around the street's bend, time seemed to hold its breath, and Elizabeth wanted so badly to bend the laws of space and time around that moment, that last glimpse of her son, and stretch it on for eternity. When he was gone, and who knew when she would see him again? Of course, deep down she knew she was being silly. Oxford wasn't exactly Beirut. Victor was just a few hours' drive away, close enough that he could come home for every Sunday roast, and go back after. That bitter pill drove her back indoors. Desperate to keep busy, she set about doing the one job that had always proved as a source of comfort to her, cleaning. There was usually so much she needed to do, so many jobs that had to be done. A household of a young adult male was one that never stayed clean and required a constant attention. Unfortunately, there was a very vital part of that equation which was no longer prevalent in her life, which was, without Victor, just an immaculate show home of one neat and impeccable housewife and base camp of traveling salesman husband. Elizabeth furrowed her brow with disgust as she looked upon the neat pile of stacked plates and dishes in her cupboard, laundry ironed and folded away, and practically sparkling worktops. Then she felt her stomach tighten. How could it be? Was there something she had forgotten? No, that couldn't be it. She had followed the same routine she had always done, and yet somehow she had finished 5 hours' worth of work in less than a half an hour. With a dispirited sigh, she walked across her now impeccably clean kitchen and fell into one of her dining table chairs. Resting her head in her hands, she tried to think of something, anything to do. God, how had her life come to this? Patrick, he was why. That bastard had always been the source of her misery. In school, she'd always been outgoing, adventurous, the popular girl, always doing something, be it tennis training or dance classes, going out with her friends, or babysitting the neighborhood kids. Anything that would get her out of the house. When Patrick had entered her life in less than 5 months after her 18th birthday, they were married. He'd been so handsome then. They'd made a lovely photo couple, the strapping rugby captain, all muscle and easy smiles, with the leggy athletic beauty on his arm in flowing white lace. The gown had been a work of art. It took a lot of looking in the photos to see the bump, the memento of a night she could remember only as an alcoholic haze, but that would prove to complete completely reshape her life. It had been a small ceremony for family and friends. Then he'd promptly whisked her across to the small house his parents had bought them on the other side of the county, near where Somerset met Devonshire, in one of the area's many sleepy little villages. Ideally located for Victor's new role in the family business, but far away from her friends and family. So she'd become a mother and a housewife. The ionic role reversal from party girl and athlete to domestic goddess, and she reveled in it. The challenge of being a new mother, the thrill of bringing life into the world. For Patrick, however, the switch had come as a nasty shock. The walking, talking definition of a good time Charlie. His family had set him up in a role he'd been born to, salesman for their peat factory, and if the idea of going from garden center to garden center, sweet-talking them into buying his family's products, hadn't quite lived up to the fast-talking rugby star's dream of an adult life, then he certainly hadn't bargained on all the hard work going to support his wife and child, nor that he'd have to keep it in his pants. She gave a dry laugh at that notion before her eyes suddenly lit up. Jennifer. Chapter 1. Years ago, the road had been a quiet, snaking stretch of tarmac, but back in 1993, work had begun on a site that would become one of the UK's largest shopping outlet villages. In less than a year, Clark's Village had transformed the A39 into a bustling thoroughfare that during rush hour could be lined with bumper-to-bumper congestion. But at 10 a.m., there was very little in the way of traffic. Sleek and polished to a high shine, the electric blue Audi TT convertible spread along the snaking stretch of the single-lane tarmac. Heedless of the rain pelting the windshield, Elizabeth kept her foot to the floor, relishing in the sweet rush of adrenaline as she sped through the numerous villages dotting the A39. She loved driving. Fast driving was like great sex. It was freedom, a complete surrender to the moment. Behind the wheel, she forgot the disappointments. She forgot the broken dreams, her sham of a marriage. She forgot all the downslopes her life had taken. There was only the road, the rush, and the sexy throb of the engine purring through her. It was her escape. There was no warning for the turning, just a sudden gaping maw in the surrounding woodland as the tarmac branched off. Used to the turn, Elizabeth dropped a gear and dragged the wheel around, adjusting just a dab of the brake as the TT swung gracefully around the hairpin, then corrected for the straight and sped on. It was a reckless maneuver, stupid even in the rain among such a treacherous blind turn, but the momentary stomach-flipping rush made the risk seem even more insignificant. Of course, she never had much to worry about in her Audi. The TT responded to her every command like the fine German-engineered automobile it was, which was good, because off of the A39, the way such a snaking lane of old tarmac and blind turns, behind any number of which could await the husk of an oncoming tractor or bus. She floored it, and the Audi turned from a purring kitten to a raging tiger. It roared and kept roaring until she pulled into the familiar L-shaped driveway of Forbidden Fruit Cottage. Despite its name, Forbidden Fruit Cottage was in fact a bungalow. A stately bungalow with numerous extensions, 2 conservatories, and 3 acres of private land. It also happened to be the only property within 2 miles. Heedless of the rain, Elizabeth got out of the sports car and sauntered up to the front door. Overhead the sky was dark and subdued, the sun blotted out by the canopy of thick gray clouds. The rain that had been a mere trickle when she set off fell in a continuous sheet that drenched her from head to toe in the few strides to the front step. All too aware of the icy rivulets running down the back of her neck, she raised a hand to knock, only for the door of heavy English oak, painted a deep blue with a plaque stamped "Forbidden Fruit," to suddenly swing inward, and Elizabeth felt her breath catch. Oh my. Chapter 2. Well, hello, Mrs. Clark. Long time no see. Hugh Beckett could barely keep his grin at bay as he opened the door. Elizabeth had the deer in headlights look. Oh, ugh, hi, Hugh. Is your mom in? I'm afraid you just missed her. She and the old man have flown south for the winter and left me here to mind the fort. As he spoke, he eyed her hungrily, giving her a slow once-over, then another for a good measure. You look good. She always had. Thank you. Thanks. You mind letting me in? It's pissing it down out here. I'm getting soaked. Good to know. Sure, I'll get you a towel. He stepped aside to let her pass, his eyes drooping down to admire her backside as she passed. It took a feat of Herculean endurance for him not to whistle. Drenched as they were, her already skinny jeans molded to her deliciously curved backside with a second skin, and that spaghetti top didn't exactly leave much to the imagination either. Suddenly very aware of the erection straining against the front of his own jeans, he pulled the front door shut and wheeled around to the airing cupboard. There he busied himself with rummaging through the ample assortment of towels on the shelves, careful to take just long enough for the very prominent bulge to diminish, for the most part anyway. However, the task was all the more difficult by the fact that he could practically feel her eyes now traveling over him. It was only when he was certain she would be growing suspicious by his prolonged search that he reluctantly turned back and handed her a fluffy pink towel. At the time, though her eyes were already a further south, they seemed to grow 2 sizes too big when they fixed on his groin, which in turn responded to the attention. Oh, shit. Can I get you anything? Tea? Coffee? Hugh quickly asked, careful to keep his voice level even as she openly ogled him for a moment before seeming to realize she was staring, dragging her eyes away. Tea. Tea, please. Yeah, I could murder a brew. And with that she snatched the towel and fled into the living room. Oh, God, was that his cock, or did he just stick a cucumber down his trousers? Oh, fuck, he's huge. Furiously scrubbing her hair with the towel, Elizabeth felt her cheeks burning at the memory of the appendage straining against huge trousers. Did I do that to him? The thought came out of nowhere to send a pulse of heat straight down to her clit. Shocked, she immediately tried to brush it aside, but then couldn't help remembering the way he'd been watching her, the hot, pretoratory gleam in his eye as he looked her over. She knew that look. It was a hot look, dark and hungry, hot and very dangerous in the eyes of a young stud. She'd seen it a lot when she was younger. On Saturday nights when she went out to hit the town with her girlfriends, the clubs and the bars would be thronged with packs of men who watched them with the same look, like packs of dogs eyeing up a fresh, juicy bit of meat. Some of Patrick's mates had given her that same look over the years, too, when they'd had a few too many and were likely to get handsy. But to see Hugh giving her that same look, no, it couldn't be. She'd known him and his mother for years, since he and Victor were kids in play school. He was young enough to be her son. He was her friend's son, and her own son's best friend, and she was too old for him, much too old. I'm old enough to be his mother. Tease up! Her heart leapt at the husky voice. Aimlessly scrubbing her hair, she swung around to find he was standing in the doorway, holding 2 steamy cups. The vision was as breathtaking as it had been when he'd been standing in the doorway. The image of him in those casual dress jeans and tight shirt, radiating such raw masculinity, an alpha male at ease in his territory, made her long to be 20 years younger. He placed them on the coffee table. Still lots of milk and 3 sugars, right? Cheers. Placing the towel over the headrest of one of the matching armchairs that encircled one side of the table, she sat in the corner of the sofa that sat opposite, able to practically feel the heat of his eyes on her skin through her clothes. She picked up the mug and sipped. Sweet and just that little bit shy of hot. Perfect. Elizabeth sipped and sipped until she knew she couldn't avoid talking to Hugh any longer without seeming rude. Then she mentally kicked herself. She was being ridiculous. Thank you for listening to this portion.